I saw so many failed experiments of take a speech engine, connect it to an LLM, and hope for the best. And I always say, hope is not a strategy when it comes to generative AI. Every single piece of working life is going to be accelerated by this. And I like to take the view of positive augmentation. I know there's a lot of uncertainty about the threat of AI to roles and so on, but the threat becomes a certainty if you ignore it. I think it's actually going to be one of the most important soft skills for people is asking the right questions.
Good questions. Today I'm sitting down with Keith Griffin. He is Cisco Fellow, one of the highest ranking technical positions at Cisco. He's at the same time VP for the collaboration at Cisco, so stuff you know from Webex, for example. He's also one of the key figures writing the AI framework, the safety framework that Cisco guides in their AI products, so also part of the AI strategy for Cisco for a very long time, since I think ranking back to 2016. So this is what we will do today. My name is Christoph Magnussen. This is AI to the DNA. And we live and breathe AI and technology with my company Blackboard every day. This podcast is made for you to also be able to bring AI to your company DNA. This is why I share that. I'm very happy that you're here. We do this for the reason that I really want to learn for myself or understand the nature of this technology in a better way. I do it for many years already, but having conversations like these really helps me to dive deeper into these questions that we need to ask ourselves and learn it. This is what we do today. So leave a comment afterwards, ask the questions that we need to ask in the next sessions, and welcome to the session with Keith Griffin. Today I'm sitting down with Keith Griffin, Cisco Fellow. And for the ones of you listening, if you don't know what a Cisco Fellow is, I can tell you, Keith is one of the people influencing millions of people collaborating every day, because Cisco Fellow is the highest ranking technical position you can have at Cisco. Very few people have this title. And I actually targeted you right away when we came to this conference. I'm like, I got to talk to Keith, because this is one of the few persons who are able to connect actually in depth what technology means. And you also wrote, as I think since you do AI since 2016 for Cisco already, so long time.
Yeah.
You wrote the AI responsible framework as well. So a lot to talk about. Thank you for making it possible.
Oh, sure. I really appreciate you reaching out and for it to happen. And yeah, I was one of the co-authors of the framework. And actually coming up on 10 years since we first started experimenting with initially supervised machine learning. Who knew it would turn into such a huge area?
Quite a while. And I mean, you are a VP at Cisco in the collaboration area and also leading the site in Ireland, as I learned. And so you have many different roles, of course, but at the same time, there must be something with this job that excites you, because you're with Cisco for quite a while.
Yeah,
so what is that?
It's 18 years, and it's there's actually a lot with the job. Almost all of it excites me. It's a really unique role. As you mentioned, the Cisco Fellow is a VP equivalent type of role. It's just amazing to achieve that. I never thought I would actually, and it's a real honor to be in the role. On the technical side of it, I focus on our AI technology strategy and direction. We have an amazing engineering team that works on that with me. I also focus on mergers, acquisitions, and investments, mostly in the AI space, but generally across collaboration, where we place our bets and where we may need to acquire. As you know, Cisco is a highly acquisitive company. We have a lot of acquisition activity, including a very recent one. And then I also run our patent strategy and research strategy. It kind of lines up with that type of role really well. So those are really the key pieces on the technology piece. And being a fellow, it also spans not just collaboration, but like you mentioned, the responsible AI framework that's across the company, AI governance also across the company, and participating in groups that have broader reach across Cisco and also the industry in some cases. But yeah, it's really fascinating role. I really enjoy it.
One personal question that I always have in the very beginning for everyone who comes here, because spanning something in that technological depth means you also try stuff that doesn't work. Is there something that comes to you in your mind when you think of these 18 years in your professional career at Cisco, where you say, like, this, I totally miscalculated how this could turn on, like where you really stumbled upon something that shows that makes you human, and it didn't work out that well?
Yeah, there's a few examples like that, and when I look back on it, though, often it's not that things maybe didn't work out, but we had the timing wrong. Like Cisco is very, very good at identifying market adjacencies and trying to be early in certain areas. And where we find we're not maybe early, but something has happened, we can often acquire and then keep pace. We think of ourselves as the world's largest startup from that point of view, and we keep going with that type of mentality. But there were several areas like that. I mean, one area that I got wrong is the current area, AI. I mean, I had no idea it would be this big. So I got it wrong from that point of view, even though it's getting it wrong while getting it right. It's been like just phenomenal, the amount of adoption, the rate of change and the pace of it. You can barely keep up. In fact, if you're not augmenting yourself with AI, you're not going to keep up. That's one that maybe fits the question. There's also areas like maybe 10 plus years ago, we experimented a bit and created product in the social software space for enterprises. And that didn't quite work out. It didn't really take off in the enterprise as such, even though the technology was really amazing. And I felt we were a little early with that. Although in hindsight, it just really didn't take off in the same way as it did in the consumer space. So that's maybe one example of that, although it was a phenomenal area to work in at the time.
When we talk here at this time, we have a global outage of Cloudflare at the moment happening. That means services like ChatGPT, Claude, I guess Spotify, Facebook, some of these are down. And if people experience that, they experience how they already are attached to this technology. And what they sometimes get wrong is that there is a totally different approach between enterprise and the normal everyday world. If you hear that, it was while you were talking, so I was looking at that. I'm like, okay, there is something happening here. I thought that could be exciting for you and me to dive into that. When you hear that, how is what you built internally different, and how did you start to get there compared to the consumer side of AI?
Yeah, and I would say in general, like it's good to know that. first of all, I wasn't aware, but it's
you were on stage. That's okay.
But I would say also that no vendor is fully immune from these types of outages. It happens, and it happens frequently. What you can try to do is make the systems as robust as they possibly can be. One of the things that I really take away from early career, actually, before Cisco, I worked for Nortel, a Canadian telecommunication company, and that started with PBX type of design. What was fascinating about that was the level of over-engineering. Telephone switches do not go out. You over-engineer every single aspect of that as much as you possibly can. And that stuck with me all the way through. Now, that's just a personal view, but then as we look at this from an industry perspective, as we get into the enterprise environment, we have to have so much failover built in. And what complicates that currently actually is recent legislative initiatives. So if you have regions where now the data must stay in the region, it doesn't give you any more the option to fail over to another region. So you have to get to a new level of granularity in your design. It's kind of an interesting side effect, maybe an unintended consequence of if you have data must reside in a certain area, you no longer have the neighboring area to fail over to. But I think in general, from an enterprise point of view, we have to make sure we have very robust services. We have good level of failover within a region, which is the solution to the last problem I just brought up, and that we're also working with the best-in-class vendors and partners, because no one organization can do all of this in the enterprise software space by themselves. So, it really trickles all the way down. Everybody has to hold themselves accountable to each other and to themselves.
Do you remember the first step, if you take that perspective, where you are now and how you build it, but do you remember the first step that you did personally in the organization to get there back in the day, where you said okay, what do we need to do first step, making an overview? I don't know, where did you start?
You mean back in the really starting from college, from
meaning taking, because AI is a totally different beast if you want to tackle it in the IT infrastructure. And Cisco is around for 40 years now. 40 years. I mean, that's a long time. And building change is hard.
Yes.
Doing that in your core field, harder.
Yeah.
what was literally the first thing you did? Did you write something to top management? Did you work on it? Did you research? Did you stumble upon something? What was it?
From an AI perspective, when we looked, so we had a brief basically from our CTO at the time, which was to investigate supervised machine learning to see, can it make a positive difference to the collaboration user experience? And the sub-brief is, can it solve a problem that was previously unsolvable or expensive to solve? So that's what set us about looking at a supervised machine learning model for noise detection. So that fits the bill, right? You could do that, but you need maybe an expensive DSP to solve that problem, which was solvable, but in an expensive way. Would it benefit the user experience? Yes, it would. And we had a very talented data scientist, the very first data scientist, Derek Chen, that was hired into the team to go to look at that. And almost immediately, he had a solution. You know, he took noises, recordings of dogs barking and keyboard clicks and trained a model. And amazingly, it worked. Like every single time, if there was a noise, it would just activate and say, there's a noise, there's a noise. And it was amazing. At the same time, it was very, very CPU intensive to the level that you couldn't run it. But here's where the magic comes in of the data scientist. He was able to remove an appropriate number of layers of the neural network to maintain the accuracy, just losing 1 or 2 points of accuracy, but dropping the CPU from, say, 30% to less than 1%. So that was a really, really big breakthrough moment for us that gave us the belief that this is not just something we could play around with and prototype, but this is something that can really have an impact in collaboration. And it definitely met the brief that we had. But the second thing, back a little bit to your question on enterprise AI, immediately we realized, wait a minute, we are going to have to do this in a way that the user is and the company is very certain about its data privacy. So immediately we started thinking about how do you do this in a way that preserves data privacy and focuses on that. And the single line I said to the team, I still say it today, is if you don't do that, if you don't focus on data privacy with AI, if you don't focus on responsible AI framework with AI, all you ever make is a good demo. But you can't really have something deployed unless you can really assure users and an organization that it's appropriate to use.
I was quite impressed. You showed it on stage. I didn't see it before. You showed a deepfake video of yourself, and your AI agent could detect it while this video was running, which is quite helpful if you have a video conference you don't know, or helpful if you see a video and you're not sure. And the second thing where you talked about was when you have guardrails built in when it comes to certain types of like hate speech or like stuff that's not appropriate and so on. Tell us a little bit and tell me a little bit about how you look on that, because this is not only a technical topic, but you need to make certain decisions. I think I showed on stage certain system prompts, and that words really make up this stuff. So there are like people coming together now with technicians talking about how to handle that technology.
Yeah, there are, and it's a fascinating area. The deepfake one in particular. In fact, the demo you mentioned, I wasn't planning to show that until I saw your deepfake or virtual agent demo, and I added it back in because I thought this is a really good way to bring it to life. Yeah. What the threat is and also what some of the solutions are. And what we've been doing there is looking, internally from an engineering point of view of what can we build to detect that. But also there's lots of emerging startups and really solid companies in that area. So we made an investment in a company called Get Real out of Berkeley. We also partnered with Pindrop. The one I showed on stage was from Karna as an AI startup, and there's many more. Reality Defender. There's lots of organizations doing really amazing work in detecting this, and it's almost going to be like an arms race, almost like the antivirus space. Like as soon as you can detect something, somebody's going to find out a way to get around the detection, and then you have to detect more. And I actually think that the way we have to think about this is maybe not from the point of view of just detecting deepfakes, but ensuring identity, looking at it from a different perspective where those becomes tools of protecting your identity and validating it. And if you look across the company at Cisco, we have a big practice in security outside of collaboration. So things like Duo and multi-factor authentication, there's many ways. I think that's what we have to do, is take this very holistic approach. If we get drawn into the romantic notion of AI fighting AI for deepfake, it's quite narrow and it's easy to fail. scale. And we have a president in the organization, Jitu Patel. He has this line that it landed on me, and I use it over and over, which is, we have to be right all of the time when it comes to security. The bad guys only have to get it right once. And we really have to focus on making sure we have a holistic approach, not just rely on one narrow set of technologies. But it is easy to get drawn into the deepfake piece. I see it as definitely an emerging threat, and something. The threat really is if it goes to scale, as opposed to these kind of very targeted attacks that happen right now. But if it goes to scale, then it's dangerous. And the second part of your question was around the guardrails. I think that's a very, very fascinating area because just like prompting, you can have the system guardrail, but you also can have application or business specific or feature specific guardrails. So I think it's going to be necessary for us to get beyond where we are right now with system level guardrails, which, as you mentioned, could be hate speech, toxicity, jailbreak, trying to force an LLM to do something that it's not intended for. I think we have to get beyond that and maybe also look at things like brand-based guardrails. If you create a virtual agent for a booking system and you ask it to book something for you, whether it's a flight or hotel or whatever it might be, you probably don't want the virtual agent to recommend a competitor's hotel or flight or something like that. So how do you get it to stay on brand is as dangerous to your business as something more sinister.
We found we got 10% off and
exactly. Yes, yeah. So it's fascinating because they are in an agentic system, that can happen unless you somehow try to control it or keep it on some guardrails to not do that.
I had a very good conversation with Richard Socher, who invented prompt engineering as a term, and he's very not critical, but like skeptical about agents scaling fast. And lately, Andrej Karpathy said something similar, that we more head to into the decade of agents instead of like the next months. You talked about agents quite a lot, and also your colleagues today. And this line that you just mentioned also landed on me, like you have to get it right every single time. And it's not easy. And you need your clients with you to test it, to try it, to work on it. This is a super complex task.
Yeah. Really.
How do you handle that field? Because I know that from your talks, you're not the hype person. You're more the person who really makes it work and happen. What's your view on agents specifically when it comes to guardrails and to get it right every time?
Yeah, I think it needs two. There's two aspects to it. The first is building trust, and that's why my main guidance is get single agent right. I agree with that sentiment of maybe the decade of agents, a good way to look at it. It's about getting started now, but you have to build trust. You have to start with a use case that's relatively narrow. I talked to a customer in Australia last week while down at Cisco Live in Melbourne, and they talked about creating an agent that could just handle cancellations. They were using our topic analytics and found that the topic that was coming up most was cancellations, which was not the intent of that particular customer service area. So number one, that's a good AI finding right away. The topic analytics gave them an outcome. Then they set about resolving that by putting a virtual agent in order to be able to deal with a cancellation. And they found, naturally enough, when you think about this from a human point of view, what follows from a cancellation is a reschedule or a rebooking. But they started only with the cancellation. When they got success, then they expand to rebooking, and then more and more. And then at some point you might say, well, maybe it's the cancellation agent, and separately you have a rebooking agent. Now you get into multi-agent and maybe agentic after that. But I really, really liked the approach they were taking. They weren't trying to boil the ocean. They were looking at it problem by problem, use case by use case, and my guess is they'll be very successful because of that approach that they're taking. They were also the second part is, after you build trust, I think, is you must focus on user experience in a relentless way. I saw so many failed experiments of take a speech engine, connect it to an LLM, and hope for the best. And I always say hope is not a strategy when it comes to generative AI. So it is, that's prone to latency, long think times in the LLM. Our team has had this really relentless focus on human-like user experience, which is very challenging. I mean, we have a good system, but I think there's still an awful long way to go. The team's been focusing on things like turn detection. If you think about this traditionally, how does turn detection work? You wait for silence. But if I wait for silence, there's that much of a pause, and you're tempted to jump in and ask it something else. So voice activity detection, silence detection, looking at also the semantics of what's being said in order to figure out when the agent might want to take its turn to talk next, because you might have hints as to when it's your turn. For example, if the agent asks you to call out your credit card number, well, it knows it can talk after it gets the 16th digit, because that's how long a credit card number is. So building that level of sophistication into the agent so that it's somewhat human-like. It's still like fallible. You can still have, faults with that, but that's why I say it's a start, and you have to have this relentless focus on user experience. We've a great user experience team that have really focused on speech, and there's been such a resurgence of speech as an interface. This, I think, agentic world will actually bring speech back into being a practical way to interact. It is our natural way after all, but we don't tend to associate it with speaking to machines. But now at this point, I mean, who knows? It looks like speech will make a somewhat of a comeback.
That would have been one of my questions anyways. What's your thought on when it comes to GUI and interface design? I mean, there are some thoughts and experiments, and when I arrived last evening, I'm like, oh, interesting. Of course, you guys still have hardware. And I was always like, why would you do hardware? And then in the end, I thought, you know what? There are companies, consumer AI companies, investing billions in hardware companies.
Yes.
There is something about touching and so on. So you said audio, you think, could be one of the interfaces. Let's dive a little bit more into that, because audio is tricky and such a different interface when it comes to anything we're used to. Like how do you approach that? What people do you have in your team to work on that?
Yeah, we have a lot of investment in this area. When we put our AI strategy together initially, we focused on 3 key areas: audio and speech, computer vision and video AI, and then language AI. And language AI somewhat backs speech AI, but we separate also speech and audio. So speech for us are workloads like transcription, closed captions, where you have maybe speech in, text out type of workload, and audio, which is core in the audio pipeline, like noise removal or acting on the media as it's happening. And just on Friday, we announced our intent to acquire a San Francisco-based company called EasyDubs, which is a speech-to-speech model for translation. So I can speak
live translation.
Yes, and that remains, as you say, it's still a challenging area. That's something that works today on approximately 1 second plus type of latency. But this team is really amazing, and I think we can get that down into the hundreds of milliseconds area over time. They're going to keep, as they join Cisco, we're going to keep working on that. But it's really fascinating. If you think about it, it will mean that I can speak here in English. You could hear me in German. You could speak in German and hear me I can hear that in my language, and the application of that broadly across multi-person meetings. You think about contact centers and calling. I think we've even yet to discover where that could go. So yeah, we think about it across those different levels of pure speech and then the audio piece, and they're coming together. And we also have a design approach to do as much as possible on the edge or near the edge. So if you take our noise removal model, it runs locally on the device or on the client because, for a number of reasons. One, from an engineering point of view, that's where the noise happens. So it makes sense to remove it there, but also it removes and reduces the sort of uncertainty for our customers, because from a trust point of view, if you're removing the noise in a closed system at the microphone where it's happening, it's a lot easier to see the data privacy aspect and transparency. Whereas if you're intercepting that audio in the cloud and removing the noise there, well, what else could you be doing is the natural question, and a good question to ask. So we try to do as much of that processing as possible on the edge. And you mentioned the hardware link as well. So when we designed our devices, for over 10 years, we have NVIDIA GPUs in those devices. It was a very visionary move by the organization to put that in, not just for the video quality, but also for machine learning workloads like face detection on the video side, but also on the audio pipeline. that gives us a really strong advantage in being able to carry out machine learning workloads on the audio pipeline and speech. And then when we get to more generic hardware like laptops and various other platforms, we have to use different techniques. But I think that, that marriage of hardware and software is core to our design beliefs. We can't always manage it, but where we have our full stack, then we can do a lot.
This is a question mark for many people. Look at that. I saw that in the audience earlier today, that they think everything in AI has to run in the cloud and at the vendor, but a lot of things can happen edge, on device, on your local machine. What did you do in order to help your team to understand better these possibilities, especially the ones that are not technically, where you say everyone in the team needs to understand that this is a new type of technology? What did you do there?
Well, we always, if we can, try to focus on solving the problem as close to the problem as possible. So if we can do that on the edge, on the device, whether it's video device or phone, we will always take that approach. But we also have a secure development lifecycle that we use inside Cisco as an engineering process, and all of our engineering teams are trained on that. And that includes our responsible AI framework also. So I think, we try to create awareness of using the best design patterns that are most appropriate for the problem that we're solving. And to your point, not just throw everything to the cloud. I mean, you can, and it's good. There's certain workloads that could only work there. When you think about large language models and so on, you just won't really run them locally. But we've also seen an emergence of, customers that either have a preference to or simply can't use cloud, but they want to be part of this AI race that's going on. And a different part of our business has created something called AI pods, which are AI-ready data centers. It's basically one of the key strategic elements of Cisco. We have AI-ready data centers, we have future-proof workplaces where collaboration is, and all underpinned by digital resilience or security business. But what that has opened up for us is we can take things like our collaboration workloads and run them on an AI pod that's capable of running open source, smaller large language models. Like you take something like Mistral 7 billion or Llama type of models, run them on the device that can run in-house, trained on what a conversation looks like. And suddenly you can have an in-house AI-powered meeting, translation, contact center, or calling solution. So this is it's a very interesting trend. It's interesting. I find it fascinating in multiple ways because, if you really are an organization that can't go to cloud, you need some sort of alternative. But out of that, you drive additional types of costs of running that versus a SaaS type of model. You get into now owning equipment again. You also have very interesting power requirements, like from running these like GPU-based, effectively small data center type solutions. But it's a fascinating area. I think it's still very much emerging. But back to your question, it gives us a whole range of different design patterns that we can choose to use, from cloud to AI pods to right on the edge and on the device within our collaboration devices.
If you take that one step further, and I mean, you mentioned it in the collaboration space, there are a lot of problems you can tackle and you see right away. What I was thinking about, and we actually talked about in the car yesterday, because I think about that a lot and I don't have an answer yet. If you take the advantages of what AI models can do and what they can do better and worse, and then you take the artifacts of work itself, how would this podcast is called AI to the DNA, so we also go really deep to that. What would an AI native app or application or workplace look like that is not invented yet? We say we don't.
That's something we're challenging ourselves with at the moment. And I think it goes back to two things you talk about as well. We use exactly the same language, which is automation and augmentation. It's like I said earlier, if people don't adopt AI, especially in professional and knowledge-based roles, it's so easy to get left behind. It's totally changed the way I work every single day. Even across our organization, I see, AI productivity tools. If you're a user experience designer, you're using AI-assisted design tools. If you're generating code, if you're writing code, you're using AI generated code and trying to move it in that way. And that's augmenting humans to be better at their job. Then when you get into the workplace itself, looking at some of the agents that we launched recently, like AI note-taking, like having a video device you can walk into, and you don't have to have a remote part to that meeting. You don't have to be in a Webex meeting or Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or platform of your choice. You can just say, I want to take notes between the two of us right now. And we just use the video device to activate that because it's capable of doing that. They're small examples, but then you have this agentic flow from it of whatever we agree in the notes, maybe it can take actions on those and follow up for us. And it's kind of supercharging the way we get things done. I know for me, but personally, I'm brutal at follow-up. I'm normally just moving on to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. So if I say I'm going to send you a document, like, good luck getting it. Like, I'm very bad about my follow-up. But if I had an agentic flow that was going to say, hey, you promised this document, or even surface it. Here's the document you promised. You want to go, just hit send. It's all you have to do. If it made it that easy for me, maybe I get better at that thing that I'm not so good at. I'm really, anybody that knows me will know that I've just, because I have to keep moving to the next thing, I very rarely get to do that follow-up. So I think in a workplace like that, it's likely to be the small incremental things at first that will make a difference. And also, back to the point about building trust, will help us buy into the technologies more. But when you think about the physical workplace itself, you think about how things have changed since COVID in terms of returning to office. There's so much revamping of office spaces and putting these like video and collaboration systems in. It's on us to make them work well. It's on us to make them work well with the network as well, which is something, again, we have as a company have an advantage in. And it's also really, I think, what's often left behind in this is the IT worker. There are people that have to make this work. They need AI too. Whether it's troubleshooting, being able to figure out and get ahead of issues, outages, whatever it might be. AI is typically good at, pattern matching, like anomaly detection. Maybe like outages can be prevented by, looking ahead and assisting the IT hero in this as well, not just the end user. So I think it has to really span the whole piece. But I think it's going to be very interesting for the physical workplace. One of the things that our user experience team is constantly focusing on is how do you make it equitable for people that are in an office and those that are remote, but to participate equally in a meeting. So recently with our AI director, it is something that it is able to frame up everybody that's in the room and the active speaker. Before we used to just jump to the active speaker, but now if you're remote, I can't read the room anymore. I'm just seeing that person. Yeah. So as we learn and evolve in our user experience thinking, we start like looking at these different types of layouts and techniques. And it would be foolish of me to say that's the answer. It's now solved. It will evolve and it will change. But there's all sorts of interesting challenges. And of course, I'm only describing offices. Not everybody works in an office. So how we automate and use AI in manufacturing and healthcare and all of the broad ways that people work. It's pretty fascinating opportunity.
Which of these artifacts you work with today would you want to see get rid? I mean, talking about like PowerPoint presentations, meetings, Excel files, reportings, emails. What would be where you say this could be something personal that you take personally and say, like, I really want to get rid of that work artifact with the native AI?
I don't know what it's necessary for me to have almost all of the things you mentioned, but I would like to get faster and better and more complete with some of those. So again, with the way I work, as I said, I'm pretty bad with follow-up, but I'm also bad with producing. I have more going on in here than I can get down on paper or get out.
I have the same.
And so I would love the concept of, if I don't have to spend like 5 hours designing a presentation, but I can describe what I want and it creates, like we saw the AI generated vidcasts, like just making that faster. So now it's done. And that's something, and that's what I'm actually experimenting with quite a bit. I run a lot of experiments that I've done manually and therefore have a reference point I run with AI to see how was it better and how close was it to the result that we got. So an example would be, when we did the acquisition announcement last week, that was a relatively manual process to get to that. So generally in a process like that, you're going to run a technology landscape, what technologies are out there. You can create a short list and then you start, working with a smaller number of companies, and then you get to a result. The same with the deepfake analysis that we did, which was over a year ago. So I had a manual process, and I compared it then with using our internal AI tools that provided by Cisco IT to run the same process. And what took me 8 weeks to analyze, and the numbers are interesting in it, 8 weeks to analyze, but not full time, just whenever I could get to it. Took 8 minutes, same number, but minutes rather than weeks, to get something that was 80% accurate. I had to spend maybe 2 or 3 more hours then tweaking it, and but that was, and that was a while ago, but that was a really fascinating breakthrough moment of, okay, I have the result and I know what it should look like from a manual process. I'm going to run this in an automated way. And it didn't get it fully right, but gosh, was it an accelerator. So next time out, I went the other way around. I'm not going to run the manual process. I'm going to start with the AI queries, and a skill, like you mentioned with the prompts, a skill is knowing to ask the right question, and then knowing how to iterate on the context of what you get back to get to where you want to be. I think it's actually going to be one of the most important soft skills for people is asking the right questions.
Good questions, a very difficult thing. And it brings me to a question when you say that, how do you, I totally understand when you share that process, because I'm working very, very similar, but taking an organization along, an enterprise, is much different, much different. What are typical mistakes that you see at the moment when people see the pace on the one side and saying this is insane, and then think how their organization can do it or not do it, or like what is a very, very typical mistake?
Well, I think the most fundamental mistake, and it's probably not the answer you're looking for, but the most fundamental mistake is not using it at all. People that think I'm good.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah,
a good point.
Yeah, I think that there's certain people that are convinced that it's either a passing trend and it will go away. There's people that even think, well, I'm far enough along in career, I'll see my career out without it. I don't think so. I think this is coming like a train. It's very real. It's very useful. That's why it's very real. But I think that is one big mistake. And then the second is, especially in enterprises, is different groups not being aligned at kind of the same pace, right? So organizations have to work together to get things done. If one is very aggressively adopting AI and moving very quickly, you can only move as quickly as the ecosystem around you. So you have to have somewhat of a coordinated approach. Even back on our responsible AI framework, our procurement team and legal team became my best friends. We would work very transactionally before that in engineering and product to those functions. Like, we need a thing, let's source it and go get it. Are we, do we have all of the right legal framework in place? We're good. And it's a very standard process. And we had to actually create, this group that was all working at the same pace, because the pace of this is so fast that, whether it's your procurement team, legal team, governance, making everybody lockstep and move quickly, but safely. You can't cut corners with it. But I think that's something I observe from just dealing with other organizations, that they maybe have one team, it might be IT or engineering because it's technical, and they lean in very heavily, and the rest of the organization just hasn't really moved at that pace yet. So that's at a high level. I think that's one.
That resonates with me. And my question would be like, what did you solve internally then to make that work? Like really concrete, saying, hey, this is a format that we established, or this is my way in updating and keeping on track. I showed on stage how I do it. I play around usually quite a lot to experiment, which brings me quite often also into trouble, saying like, that's maybe a bit too far. But I pretty much know what I'm doing and testing and trying it out with fun stuff that is not critical, but that's my way. What did you establish to scale it?
I think a key thing was establishing an AI governance function, not a department, but just like an overlay in the organization that represented all those groups I mentioned earlier, right? Having product and IT and legal and procurement every organization will be different. They might not have some of those functions. They might have different functions, but making sure that there's a representative from each that can do two things: represent the needs of your group for AI, but also represent what's happening in AI into those groups, so that everyone is matching that pace.
So how technical are they in the governance position?
They don't have to be, because I mean, they could be from entirely non-technical functions, but it's about everybody being on the same page and same pace.
Yeah.
That's what was really made it work. And then those that are most motivated will end up driving some of that. But I think it's a very useful function, and it also, it puts like new life into areas like compliance, governance. These are now really, in my view, really critical functions.
If you take one step back and you look at the 12-year-old Keith, and you have to explain him this kind of new field here, and I'm asking for a friend with kids. What's your story to like teach it to the young Keith or even to kids in order to say, hey, this is something you should look at? And I mean, at the same time, they need to be curious, play with it, but also know, okay, there's not only good stuff happening. What do you do here?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, like, don't ignore it, especially at that age and going into education, and embrace it. And it doesn't matter in what field. It doesn't matter even if you're doing something practical and hands-on. There's going to be some form of AI augmentation and automation to it. It's absolutely inevitable. So the first piece of advice would be, embrace it, understand it, and know how to make it an advantage for yourself. I think every single piece of working life is going to be accelerated by this. I think the more practical, hands-on, craft, trade-based roles are maybe the later to be, positively impacted by this, but will be, I think, in that way. And the more professional, knowledge-based, even software development are going to be the more immediately affected by this. And again, I like to take the view of positive augmentation. I know there's a lot of uncertainty about the threat of AI to roles and so on, but my view would be, the threat becomes a certainty if you ignore it. Like, you have to take this on. There's research that I use a lot in talks that came from Stanford AI and Stanford Medical. I think it was 2016. And they asked themselves the research question, could AI replace a radiologist? And it was very fascinating research where there were certain tasks that AI was really good at. Naturally, it's good at image recognition, but that's not all that a radiologist does. They're a far broader role. And at that point in time, the output and outcome of the research was that it was a Professor Langlotz, I think, his output was that AI would not replace a radiologist, but a radiologist using AI would replace a radiologist not using AI. Now, take radiologist, replace it with lawyer, accountant, software engineer, any knowledge-based profession. I think it's a true statement. And that's 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago now, when they published that. Yet, the field of radiology is still thriving.
More than that. I mean, Geoffrey Hinton had to roll back.
Yes, correct.
Got the Nobel Prize because there is this paradox that you create actually more work when you innovate in a certain area. And people always ask me, like, will it replace the jobs? I think we made a YouTube video about it 7 years ago or something.
Okay.
And we also said, like, no, it won't. Because what usually happens with this paradox is that the work explodes and gets more.
Yes.
You solve it in a different way. And that's why I'm so curious and really, really understanding in which area will it change and affect first. We talked about system prompts between our talks. And it fascinates me that so few people have an understanding that words direct the system. And you have so many different products. how do you govern the different layers of system prompts? And let's get a little bit technical. I mean, this is also something like, how do you manage it to collaborate on system prompts?
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of like go-to prompts that are good for just the overall like safety of a system, like basic stuff like only answer if you're 100% certain, you know, like managing the core output. But then there's certain things that have to be domain specific or application specific. So we focus on having some core system prompts, but then also empowering engineers to create prompts that are relevant for that workload. Like a contact center interaction is very different from a multi-person meeting, very different from maybe a professional business call on a calling type of system. It may be different also by modality. So messaging type of prompt may be different from a call summary. And there's slight variations. Some of them then are very different. And others also bring in other features into the prompt engineering. Like in a contact center environment, very, very likely you're going to need to do a PII redaction. Whereas in like a meeting, well, you don't necessarily want that. You don't want the transcript of the meeting saying person said to person, I will send you the content. You need the names for the actions. So it's so you're less likely to have something like PII redaction in that. Whereas in contact center, where that's required, where you have credit card details and other personal information, that becomes very, very mandatory. So in these core services like prompting, guardrails, PII redaction, we find that it's important to empower the teams, but then every single team on every feature to do with AI has to do responsible AI impact assessment. And it's in that assessment that the checks and balances come into it of, have you implemented that enough, maybe too much? It's getting the balance right in that. So from an engineering process point of view and technical point of view, that's how we manage it. And we also have a lot of knowledge sharing in the AI space across the teams. So they'll if there's somebody is stuck on how do I, ensure safety in a certain type of output, they will ask, and maybe somebody else has solved it in a different area, like just good old like team working together to get things done. So, but it's a really important area to have not just the system prompts, but domain specific and application, maybe even feature specific, and also to wrap them in a safe way. I mean, it's safer to have a system that's behind a UI than like an open text box. So you can get all sorts of, you covered very well prompt injection and things like that. And that's quite a risky area. When you think about something like agentic AI, then each agent in an agentic flow becomes a new prompt injection attack surface. Yeah, so you really proliferate that problem. But it's something that. It's something that's also an emerging area. This is when you look at the next wave of like what we need to focus on next. It's actually a lot of that. It's like known problems that are maybe expanding in terms of their opportunity and threat that we have to go solve.
Which is a very good closing statement, because I already got the sign that you need to head to the next meeting. One last very quick one. Is there a question people should ask you about AI, but they never ask you?
That's a good one. Well, because I work a lot on acquisition stuff, the number one question people don't ask me is, "What are you working on right now?" Because that would give it away. No, I don't know. I think like generally I deal a lot with like very knowledgeable people in the AI space, and they're normally spot on with what they ask about. But I really a question that's maybe not asked enough is the where next, and I think that's almost like fading out because it's moving so quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you asked me a year ago, I would have said multimodal AI is the future. Now I say agentic AI, but in a multimodal way. And in 3 months' time, it's going to be like something else. How do we know? So we just have to stay with it. And there's never been a more fascinating time to work in this space.
So we will see for a second round.
Yes, I hope so. I'd look forward to that.
Thank you so much, Keith.
Thanks a lot.